This podcast is brought to you by the United States Marine Corps.
What's up, sports fans? Welcome to week 2 of the San Diego Prep Insider Lacrosse podcast, sponsored by the U.S. Marines. It's nice to be back together. The traffic thing and the 163, everything was weird last week. That's what... Chalk it up to the preseason.
Absolutely.
Now we're in the regular season. We're, week 2 for some teams, week 1 for other teams. For those of you that are just joining us for our first one, I'm Christian Pedersen, the talking head of sports here, and I know nothing. This is the expert. This is Coach Tom DeMeo. Run people through just a little bit of your lacrosse resume if they're meeting you for the first time.
Well, I coach currently the head varsity coach here at Santa Fe Christian in San Diego. Previous to that, I was back in the East Coast, Norwood High School, and I coached at Northeastern University as head coach in Boston for a few years as well before moving out here to California. So been doing this a long time.
The children, you currently have a national champion for your oldest son at Maryland. He also holds several records. So trust me, when I say fill in the blank, this is our actual expert analysis insider. This guy actually does know what he's talking about. I just tag along to make a fool out of myself and pick the wrong schools. Every week we get together for a couple minutes and we celebrate some shout outs and game balls from the previous week. We talk about top teams in Division 1, in Division 2, girls, guys. We'll really try to make our way across the county for everybody all season long. Part of that is us. Part of that is you guys tweeting us, Instagramming us, letting us know who's doing what, because we cannot be everywhere all the time. But this is just supposed to be, the underlying theme is grow the game. And
Absolutely.
And that's where it has been headed. That's where it is headed. I'd say that it's safe to say at this point, San Diego is the hub in California of lacrosse.
Yeah, I think you're starting to see a lot of balance happening. I mean, you still have your big schools and your really good teams, but you're starting to see those kind of 10 through 25 developing and starting to beat each other. And there's definitely going to be more balance, just like you're seeing in college lacrosse. You're seeing, the 30th ranked team beating the 5th ranked team. And, I think just more kids playing means more talent across the board on both the boys and the girls side.
So let's talk about that. That's where we'll jump off here is in lacrosse, it'll be very easy for us to say that the usual suspects are up at the top. Torrey, Nato, LCC, defending open division champions, LCC. Congratulations again, guys. But, I guess our one discussion point this year will be, like you said, that middle of the pack. Last year, you guys make it up to Open Division for the first time. Bishops gets in at that 8 seed at Open Division. Westview barely misses out. Carlsbad is up in that mix. So pushing aside the fact that Torrey, Nato, LCC, those 4 to 5 teams that are always up at the top will be still up in the top. What are some things that just looking around the county this year get you kind of excited about that middle of the pack?
Well, I think, some of those teams who were up there had some seniors that graduated. And as anything, it's all about, what type of feeder system you have, your youth programs. And I think over the next couple of years, it's the teams that really step up are going to be teams that do have the best middle school programs and feeder programs, and you're just going to start to see it's going to be less of just a collection of the top teams and the best players going to the same schools. So I think if not this year, the next couple of years are going to be pretty exciting to see some of these programs. Like La Jolla came a long way last year and made some noise in Division I. So those guys were Division II previously, and I know years back those guys were losing a lot of games. So you're starting to see these schools come up, and that's a result of a good feeder system that they have there, and hopefully you'll see more schools doing that and focusing on that.
To bring up La Jolla, Division II champions, then Division I champions. On the girls' side, they only started one senior all season long last year. So you're right, there is a correlation that new schools are starting to break into it. I think that a couple things you got to look out for is that, like you said, Torrey graduates people. LCC graduates people. The firepower shifts and changes. Let me ask you this, Coach, for the uninitiated, because I'm assuming our fan base is about 50-50, knows anything about lacrosse to knows nothing about lacrosse. One thing we were talking about here is you have a senior leader in Coop as your goalie versus other schools. Poway has a senior goalie who's going to lock them down. But it looks like across the county, we're maybe going towards a more offensively driven year this year.
Yeah, there's there's a handful of standout goaltenders and defenders that on each team that that I recognize, but there is really a lot of good offensive players in the county, and a lot of high ranked guys in the country, some nationally ranked players that come from San Diego. So I think you're going to see a lot of offense. I think that's going to be, in the end, it's going to come down to who can play defense and make stops, who's going to win games.
So you still put more faith into defense than offense?
Yeah, I mean, it's the old adage, defense wins championships, and it's no different in lacrosse. I mean, it's, offense can control games, and you can win with offense, but defense is important. Having good goaltending and leadership back in the defensive side and communication is the difference between the really good teams and the average teams.
So just on our parting way here, because like I said, this is sort of, we're getting up to speed. We're educating you guys on who and what this is if you're catching us for the first time. Normally we'll hit you with a couple of games to go check out the rest of this week. But there's out-of-city teams, there's out-of-state teams from San Diego are leaving. But just where, on the outside looking in, do you put your confidence index in, oh, that was a close win versus that was a blowout? What are you looking for as just a couple of early season markers for, that's a team that is showing me something? That's a team that I'm a little concerned about.
Yeah, I think it's great that, one thing to note that there are a lot of East Coast and teams coming out here. Currently, you have Lawrenceville Prep out of New Jersey, you have Nobles, I think Phillips Andover out of New England was out here. And it's nice to see how we compare to those schools. And this time in particular, I think Lawrenceville Prep came out here and both Bishops and Nato both beat them. And I think along our lines of offense, Coronado put up 16 points on them and Bishops put up 13 points on them. And so that's a lot of goals scored coming out of our non-prep type schools. High schools going against schools that have PG players. So I think you look for how many goals are scored. I mean, instantly you look at a team that can put up 16 or 13 goals on a very good team, in a post-grad team, and you say, hey, those guys' offense is clicking. And you also look at how many goals teams are letting up. Westview, I think, is in their 2 games, let up 4 goals. We happen to be one of those teams that played them, and they had really strong defense, and they communicated, and they replaced their senior goalie last year with, I think, a good younger goalie. So you start to look at that and say, those guys are playing good defense, and let's face it, if you're letting up 2 or 3 goals a game, you're going to win games.
I like to hear that. I think that for me, my biggest thing is just that it's so easy to settle into that league mentality is the rivalry is LCC versus Torrey. That's the game that matters. We're looking so far into the future this season that you lose spectrum of they're just beating the brakes off of teams right now. They're doing, like you said, winning on both ends of the field. So that's where I'm looking out right now is I see a couple of teams around the county that are providing that margin of victory. And that's where you start to say, wow, okay, you look at that and yeah, maybe it's a D1 versus a D2, but a 15-goal margin of victory, a 10-goal margin of victory is where you start to say early season, that's turning some heads. And there's a couple programs on both sides, guys and girls, because we're going to be talking guys and girls that are doing that.
Yeah, and margin of victory, I mean, it's still early, so, sometimes when you look at the scores, you're just looking at really, how many how many goals were scored and what the margin is, but you haven't had a lot of the big rivalry games yet. But I think there's some new rivalries. I think Torrey Pines, although them and Coronado have always had a good rivalry. I think after last year, that's a game that Torrey Pines is circling on their schedule, and I'm sure LCC and Coronado have that championship game rivalry, which came down last minute. So I do think some of the rivalries will be renewed a little bit this year, and these kids all play together, and it's been a long time. They grew up playing against each other, with each other, so that's one of the unique things that we have here is a lot of these kids play club together. So when they get into high school and they start competing against each other, it's a little bit more dynamic.
It certainly is an interesting way that it's all set up, and just to kind of tail off of the margin of victory, that is something that we are going to constantly talk about all season long because that feeds into the very complicated who gets what seed in the playoffs. Of it, you got to get it. It maxes out at 10 goals is the most for a margin of victory that you can get. So you will see some teams pile it on at the end just to get up to that 10. It's like I said, he knows everything. I know some, if not nothing. You can ask literally anybody that goes to SFC. I know nothing about sports, and I know only how to pick against them. So we'll stop there. Well, the easy reading for the first one. They've got a game to get to. I've got other games to go catch. But let's do this. Sports fans out there, we'll be back every Monday with top 10s, with our podcasts. We need your help, though. Bring us scores. Bring us highlights. Bring us just, hey, this kid from Bonita, this kid from Eastlake, this kid from places, because it isn't just north of the 8 anymore. We saw, last year with Nate McPeak out at Eastlake. Yep. He's playing at Syracuse. We're seeing some kids in some schools pop up that is like, we're past just 4 or 5 schools control the whole county. We're into a new era.
Yeah, and the more information we have, the better. It's you can never have too much information, and we can't put it all on. But I know that I get to follow a lot of the boys and girls games. In those top 10 teams between going to my kids' games and coaching and scouting. But we'd love to have more information from all the teams, because it is truly about growing the game. And whether it's Bonita with some of those newer programs, it's great to have that information, because I know we've had some of those teams on our segments before. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, hit us up. We're growing the game. We're not trying to just be snooty open division only teams. So yeah, that'll do it for week 1. Christian Pedersen, Coach Tom DeMeo, Division I champion or state. He's got a lot of rings in every level of the family there. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.